I never imagined that opening an old steel safe would erase 25 years of everything I believed about my family. It wasn't stuffed with stacks of cash like you see in movies. It was worse. Inside were neatly organized folders, yellowed legal documents, bank statements from countries I'd never visited, and one letter with my name written across the front in handwriting I immediately recognized. My father's. As I unfolded the letter, my hands started shaking. The very first sentence stole the air from my lungs. Emily, if you're reading this, it means your mother could no longer stop the truth from reaching you. I remember staring at those words, unable to breathe. Because according to my entire family, there had never been any truth to hide. And yet, sitting on the living room floor of the house I'd grown up in, I was about to discover that my own parents had hidden $18 million that belonged to me, for 25 years. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 43 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed I had lived a perfectly ordinary life in Columbus, Ohio. I worked as a senior nurse at Riverside Methodist Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts that left my feet aching and my back stiff almost every night. Nursing wasn't glamorous, but I loved helping people. It gave my life purpose, even when the pay barely covered the mortgage. My husband, Daniel, owned a small HVAC repair company. Business was steady, but nothing spectacular. Some months we worried about replacing our aging pickup truck. Other months we argued over unexpected medical bills or college tuition for our daughter, Sophie. Like millions of American families, we lived paycheck to paycheck. Vacations were weekend camping trips. Birthdays meant homemade cakes. Christmas gifts were carefully budgeted months in advance. Looking back now, that's the part that hurts the most. Not because we struggled. Because we never had to. Growing up, my parents always painted themselves as survivors. Dad, Richard Carter, worked as an insurance adjuster before retiring. Mom, Linda Carter, spent years as a librarian. Neither job made them wealthy, and they reminded me of that constantly. We may not have much, Mom would say whenever I asked why we couldn't afford something, but we have each other. I believed every word. When I wanted to attend an out-of-state university, they convinced me local community college was the responsible choice. When I dreamed about medical school, Dad gently explained that our family couldn't afford that kind of debt. You'll thank us someday, he'd tell me. Life isn't about money. So I became a registered nurse instead. I never blamed them. I thought they had done the best they could. Even after marrying Daniel, my parents remained deeply involved in our lives. Sometimes too involved. Mom insisted on reviewing our finances. Dad constantly warned me about risky investments. Whenever Daniel mentioned starting a second business location, Dad always had reasons why it would fail. You don't want debt, he'd say. You don't want unnecessary risks. Slowly, without realizing it, we built our lives around fear instead of opportunity. I thought they were protecting us. Now I know they were protecting something else. Everything changed the morning Dad died. The call came just after 6. Massive heart attack. He never made it to the hospital. The funeral brought relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone shared stories about Dad's honesty, generosity, and wisdom. Listening to them, I felt proud. I had no reason not to. After the service, Mom surprised everyone. She announced she planned to sell the family home immediately. It has too many memories, she said quietly. Nobody questioned her. Except me. The house had been in our family since before I was born. Dad had refused every offer to sell it. Suddenly, within days of his funeral, Mom wanted it gone. It didn't make sense. While helping pack the basement a week later, I noticed something strange. Behind an old wooden shelving unit was a section of concrete that looked newer than the surrounding wall. Dad had always been meticulous. Nothing in that basement was accidental. Curiosity got the better of me. Daniel helped move the shelf. Hidden behind it was a heavy gray safe I'd never seen before. There wasn't any dust on the handle. Meaning, someone had opened it recently. Did you know this was here? Daniel asked. I shook my head. When Mom came downstairs and saw us standing in front of the safe, the color drained from her face. For just a split second. Then she forced a smile. Oh, that's just your father's paperwork. Her answer came too fast. Too rehearsed. I noticed something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not grief. Fear. What's the combination? I asked. Her eyes locked onto mine. I don't remember. Daniel looked at me. That answer didn't convince either of us. Later that evening, after Mom left to stay with my aunt, I searched Dad's old office for insurance papers. Instead, inside the top drawer sat a small envelope labeled only with 3 numbers. 41, 17. 92. 3 numbers. 3 numbers that would completely rewrite my life. I stared at them for several long seconds. Then I looked toward the basement door. Something deep inside me whispered that once that safe was opened, there would be no going back. The numbers felt strangely heavy in my hand as Daniel and I walked back down to the basement. Neither of us spoke. The old house was so quiet I could hear the furnace humming through the walls. I knelt in front of the safe, wiped the dust from the dial, and slowly entered the combination. 41. 17. 92. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, click. The locking bolts released. I looked at Daniel. I don't know if I want to open it anymore. He squeezed my shoulder. Whatever's inside, we'll face it together. I pulled the heavy door open. There wasn't any jewelry. No stacks of $100 bills. No family heirlooms. Instead, every shelf was packed with perfectly labeled binders, legal envelopes, hard drives, and sealed document boxes. Dad had organized everything with military precision. The very first folder was labeled Emily Elizabeth Carter. My full legal name. My heart started pounding. Inside was a birth certificate. Then another. One was the copy I'd always known. The second listed a different hospital. Different signatures. Different witnesses. What is this? I whispered. Daniel frowned. That's impossible. Before either of us could process it, another envelope slid onto the floor. Across the front were 5 words. To my daughter, Emily. Dad's handwriting. I unfolded the letter. Emily. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I've spent 25 years telling myself I was protecting you. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. You'll have to decide that for yourself. Everything your mother told you about your inheritance is a lie. The money was never lost. No one stole it. It has always existed. And legally, it has always belonged to you. I stopped reading. No. Daniel stared at me. What money? I looked back down. 25 years ago, your grandfather created the Carter Family Preservation Trust. After selling Carter Industrial Logistics, he placed $18 million into that trust. You were named the sole beneficiary on your 18th birthday. Your mother begged him not to tell you. She believed wealth would ruin your life. When he died unexpectedly, she convinced me we should keep the trust secret until we believed you were mature enough. That day never came. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. $18 million. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it couldn't possibly be real. This has to be fake. Daniel immediately reached for another folder. It contained trust agreements, tax filings, investment reports, annual performance statements. Every page carried official signatures. Every account had grown steadily over 2.5 decades. The original $18 million had been professionally managed. The latest valuation made my vision blur. $31,842,119.47. I read the number 3 times. Then 4. Daniel looked just as stunned. Oh my God. I suddenly remembered every conversation I'd ever had with my parents. Every scholarship they told me not to pursue. Every business opportunity they called too risky. Every time they insisted we couldn't afford something. Every sacrifice. Every disappointment. Every dream I buried. None of it had been necessary. My entire adult life had been built on a lie. Daniel kept opening folders. This isn't just an investment account. What do you mean? They've been receiving distributions. I looked over. He pointed to annual withdrawals. Every single year. Sometimes $200,000. Sometimes nearly $500,000. Always approved by 2 trustees. Richard Carter. Linda Carter. I felt cold. They were spending it. Daniel looked sick. They weren't just hiding your money. They were living off it. I couldn't speak. Images flashed through my mind. Dad's expensive fishing boat he'd claimed was bought secondhand. Mom's small inheritance that supposedly paid for her renovations. Their luxury cruises. The country club membership they said a friend had gifted them. Everything suddenly made sense. Not because they had earned that lifestyle. Because they had financed it with money that legally belonged to me. I sank onto the basement floor. For 43 years. I'd believed my parents had sacrificed everything. Now I realized. I'd been the one making the sacrifices. The next morning, I drove straight to my mother's temporary apartment. She smiled when she opened the door. Emily, sweetheart. I interrupted her. How long? Her smile disappeared. I don't know what you're talking about. The trust. Silence. The money. She stared at me without blinking. Then quietly stepped aside. I suppose you opened the safe. There wasn't an ounce of surprise in her voice. Only resignation. I walked inside. Tell me you didn't know. She didn't answer. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table and folded her hands. I always knew. My knees nearly gave out. You watched Daniel and me struggle. Silence. You watched us refinance our house. Silence. You watched Sophie take student loans. Still nothing. Finally she whispered. I did what I thought was best. I slammed the folder onto the table. You stole my future. Her eyes filled with tears. No. I preserved it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You call this preserving it? You let your daughter work night shifts for 20 years. You let your granddaughter graduate with debt. You let us believe we were barely surviving. She looked at me with complete sincerity. If I had given you that money at 18, you would have become spoiled. You would have married the wrong man. You would have lost your ambition. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. You don't know that. No, she admitted. I don't. But I wasn't willing to gamble your future. I leaned closer. Then why were you spending it? For the first time. She had no answer. The silence lasted almost 30 seconds. Finally she whispered. It wasn't stealing. We always planned to pay it back. I stared at her. $31 million. Hundreds of thousands withdrawn every year. And she expected me to believe it was just a loan? She reached for my hand. I know how this looks. I pulled away. No. I don't think you do. As I stood to leave, she spoke one sentence that froze me in place. Your father didn't tell you everything. I slowly turned around. What does that mean? She looked toward the window. The trust isn't the biggest secret he kept. Those words echoed in my head the entire drive home. Because if hiding my fortune for 25 years wasn't the biggest secret, then what on earth could possibly be worse? I barely slept that night. My mother's final words kept replaying in my mind. The trust isn't the biggest secret he kept. How could there possibly be something worse? The next morning, Daniel and I spread every document from the safe across our dining room table. It looked less like family paperwork and more like evidence in a federal investigation. Hours passed before Daniel noticed something unusual. Emily. He held up a thin manila envelope tucked inside the back of one binder. It says, "Deliver only if trust is contested." My stomach tightened. Inside was another letter from my father, and a business card for a Columbus estate attorney I'd never heard of. The letter was short. Emily. If your mother tells you I stole your inheritance, she's lying. If she tells you I protected it alone, she's lying again. There is one person who knows everything. His name is Michael Brennan. He has every original document. I grabbed my phone immediately. By noon, Daniel and I were sitting across from Michael Brennan, a silver-haired attorney whose office overlooked downtown Columbus. The moment I introduced myself, he gave me a look I'd never forget. "I've been expecting you," he said quietly. I frowned. "You knew this day would come?" He nodded. "Your grandfather made me promise I'd tell you the truth if either trustee died." He unlocked a fireproof cabinet and placed a thick leather folder on his desk. "Everything in here is original." As I opened it, I saw my grandfather's signature on dozens of documents. Then I reached one titled, "Final Letter of Intent." Michael folded his hands. "You should read this yourself. If you're reading this, then Richard has failed to honor the promise he made me. This fortune was never intended to control your life. It was meant to give you freedom to choose it. I watched your mother become obsessed with protecting money instead of protecting people. If she ever keeps this inheritance from you after your 18th birthday, I authorize my attorney to remove her as trustee immediately." I looked up. "What?" Michael sighed. "Your grandfather anticipated this exact possibility." "He left legal instructions?" "Yes." I felt dizzy. "Then why didn't anyone stop them?" His expression turned grim. "Because your father convinced me every single year that he was finally going to tell you. Every single year. For 25 years. He'd visit my office," Michael continued. "He'd say, 'Not yet. She's under too much stress.' Then, after Sophie graduates. Then, after retirement. There was always another excuse." "So you believed him?" "I wanted to." He paused before adding. "But during the last 6 months of his life, I don't think he believed himself anymore." Michael handed me one final envelope. This arrived the week before Richard died. Inside was a notarized confession signed by my father. He admitted that he had allowed fear, and eventually comfort, to replace honesty. He admitted he had authorized withdrawals from my trust. He admitted he knew he had betrayed me. And at the very bottom was one sentence that broke my heart. "I hope my daughter judges me by the father I tried to be, not the coward I became." Tears blurred the page. For the first time since opening the safe, I cried. Not for the money. For the father I'd loved. The father who had spent decades digging himself so deep into a lie that he no longer knew how to escape it. Within 2 weeks, my attorney filed a petition in probate court. The evidence was overwhelming. Every withdrawal. Every unauthorized distribution. Every breach of fiduciary duty. My mother hired an expensive legal team. She insisted the money had always been used for the family's benefit. But financial records told a different story. Luxury vacations. Designer jewelry. A condominium in Florida titled under an LLC. A country club membership. Nearly $4 million had been diverted over 25 years. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the documents. Finally, he looked directly at my mother. As trustee, you owed your daughter the highest legal duty recognized under Ohio law. He paused. You treated the trust as your personal checking account. My mother lowered her head. The ruling came that afternoon. She was permanently removed as trustee. The court ordered a full forensic accounting. Assets purchased with trust money would be liquidated. The remaining balance, including recovered funds and investment growth, would be transferred entirely under my control. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I ignored every microphone. My mother called my name. Emily. I stopped walking. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Older. Not because of age. Because the weight of 25 years had finally caught up with her. I'm still your mother. I took a long breath. And I'll always be your daughter. But those two things don't erase what happened. Tears rolled down her face. I thought I was protecting you. No, I said softly. You were protecting the version of me you wanted to control. Neither of us spoke again. I walked away. Not out of hatred. Out of acceptance. People always ask what I did with the money. The answer usually surprises them. Yes, Daniel expanded his business. We paid off every debt. Sophie graduated from law school without borrowing another dollar. We established college funds for our future grandchildren. But the first check I ever wrote wasn't for myself. It was for Riverside Methodist Hospital. I created a scholarship for nursing students who couldn't afford tuition. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to believe your dreams were limited by money. Only now, I could make sure someone else's weren't. Sometimes I still drive past my childhood home. The windows are different now. Another family lives there. Kids ride bicycles in the driveway where I once played. I don't feel anger anymore. Just sadness for what could have been. My parents had 25 years to tell me the truth. They waited until a steel safe and a stack of forgotten papers did it for them. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. Money doesn't destroy families. Secrets do. And the longer the truth stays locked away, the more expensive it becomes when someone finally finds the key.